Welcome, I am Alex Smoke. This will be the first video on my new channel and my website, revamped website. Going to be doing a track breakdown of the track Dust from 2016 on RNS. And yeah, this is probably the most popular track, I think, on Spotify and things like that, I think, at the moment. So it made sense to make this the first one. I'm going to talk about the track breakdown and the arrangement, the production, what effects I used, plugins and all that, and why I made certain decisions. Talk about the synth and the drums and the vocals and how it all goes together. Yeah, so hopefully you'll benefit from it. Let's get going. So here we are in Logic Pro. So this was originally created in Logic something else, Logic 9 maybe, I guess. So I've had to update the session to work with this version of Logic, and it means I've lost a few plugins. So yeah, in circumstances, don't know if you can see, hopefully you can see this down here on the left, the screen, because the screen's big, the relative size of the mixing elements can be quite small. Let's see if I can make that a bit bigger. No, it doesn't make the track bigger. Okay, so we'll just have to try and do our best to show you what's going on in each individual track. When I look at the mixer view, okay, these little signs down here where we've got little exclamation marks, let's make them a little bit bigger. These exclamation marks are missing plugins. Most of my EQs, I think they're PREQ87, which is an old EQ, and HEQ, which is a Waves EQ, which I used to use, and that there is a compressor, so we'll just mute that. And some of these other ones exist on tracks which are no longer needed, aux tracks in this example. First things first, pretty simple actually. It's funny, it doesn't sound so simple, it sounds quite layered and textured, and that's really just the choice of sounds. I think it's just the way it came together. Some things have involved a lot of previous treatment and exist here. I'll expand these out a bit. These here, all these loop parts, all these vocal parts rather, are from Kima, which is like the DSP platform I use for more advanced processing, and that's kind of a big part of this track, and a big part of a lot of my vocal parts is that I use Kima to manipulate the vocal. I'll show you them in due course, but just to explain, that's basically, I work in MIDI nearly all of the time, and to my detriment, because then I'm trying to open old sessions and I realize I can't open them because I've lost all the plugins or they don't work anymore. So yeah, lesson learned. I now try and turn everything into audio, and the same applies to you kids. Turn your sessions into audio stems before you finish, or when you finish. Okay, and here we go. This is like the main vocal. It's still pretty crude. You can see it's just a take. I'll talk through the automation on it and stuff afterwards. And this I've kept in as well. This is like the original vocal take, or is that the original vocal take? No, maybe the original vocal takes. Ah, there's the original vocal take. So I'm going to keep that in as well to show you what the original take sounded like when I very first recorded the vocal, just to give you an insight into the way I work generally. Okay, so the structure is pretty simple. I'll start off breaking it down from the drums first, yeah, and then we'll get more and more into the weeds with all the various other parts. So if I start here and kick, the main guy in any dance track. So man, shockingly simple when I actually look at the sum total of the processing on it. Okay, down here, kick. So let's take the kick track, this track here. On it we have sampler. This is the basic EXS24 sampler that comes with Logic. I use this a lot for everything, mainly because I've now got such a library of things, all my kits. How many kits I've got, it's just like I rely on these shorthands and all my percussion sounds, and a lot of these are from really random places, you know. Some of these things I haven't used probably in 100 years, but like Invitus, Pervert drums I still use a lot. Anyway, bunch of stuff. And so yeah, so this is the thing I'm using. I use these are DMD, they're called DMD, Driven Machine Drums. Recommended highly. As a guy who went to enormous trouble to bounce drum sounds using a lot of analog equipment,
using a lot of good quality drum machines and samplers and all sorts, and then made them into limited edition sound sets of mainly percussion, driven machine drums, hence the name. And this is the first pack, but he's made subsequent packs. This one sold out because he did them as a limited edition. I think the third one he did, he just made it available for everyone. And I highly recommend them, they're really good. So here I've divided them up in my sessions. I've got DMD and I've got all mode divided. So here, these are the deep kicks. So yeah, we've got a deep kick. If I solo that, there we go. You can see this guy's done a lot of processing already. You know, it's not like I need to do a huge amount to make that into a usable drum sound. The main thing here is like what rhythm I've chosen. Again, super simple, just an offbeat rhythm. You got 2 beats which hit on the first beat of the bar, but then the 2 in the middle are offbeat, so more like a kind of breakbeat feel. But super simple. And after that, I've got Decapitator, and I've got that driving, because obviously driven machine drums wasn't driven enough, so giving it a bit more crunch up the top made it cut through more. Super simple processing though. And the EQ, which isn't loading, so I did do some EQing in this originally. I have no idea what. If I load up Pro Q, you can see what's going on in the waveform. I would imagine what I probably did was carve out a little bit of space for some of the other elements happening in the low mid-range around the 200s, because I know there's some other pretty strong parts. So we'll see. I might have also sidechained them, because yeah, you'll see there's some big bass elements. So I will put that there for now, just for the mad hell of it. Let's make it dynamic, why not? 3 dB of drop. That's the kick part. You can see I've been very creative with the arrangement of the kick. Look at that. Look at that deep creativity at work. Kick on. Kick off. Basic bastard. And next. Okay, next. Stin kit. So this is a kit made by someone, a guy or a gal, STNN. I just tried looking up on the internet to see if I could find out if these still existed, and I found no trace of STNN kit. Okay, so here we've got C sharp. So every C sharp would be a sort of equivalent, so maybe like a clap or a something. And if you go up another octave, you get another variation of it. And if you go up another octave, you get another variation of it. And these were designed to be layered. So his idea was that you, in hip hop production obviously especially, it's quite common to like make lots of layers, and lots of other dance production as well, but particularly hip hop. Lots of layers of individual sounds to make more complex sounds. But as we've discussed, I am basic, so I just wanted that one. So that's that. Again, ultra complex. It's on the 2nd beat and the 4th beat. You'll see I've been pretty inventive though, and I've taken it out for like 16 bars here. It's completely taken it out. So amazing. I'm going to rename that. A lot of the time I find that in old sessions I didn't name anything. I think I worked quite quickly, and I just like instrument 2 served the purpose just as well. So I'm going to call it Clop actually, because I don't know what it is. Clop. And same kit. Here we go. Here we've got other things on the same kit here. Second thing I've got on there is a snare sound. So you can hear the clop in the background, and then this guy, which is, I just solo him. I'm going to take all the effects off. You can hear there's a hell of a lot of bass in that sound. So obviously I've cut that bass out because it's got a really heavy bass hit. That's probably on the Decapitator, yeah. So on the Decapitator, not only I crushed it, I've taken the whole bottom end off up to 200 using the Neve compression, Neve saturation rather, and taking the top end off. Worth mentioning here that I used Decapitator especially, but other saturation devices as well, kind of like mixture of EQ and compression a lot. So I just find it a really quick musical way to work. The saturation algorithms create a more complex reaction between parts than just a compressor. And also you can play with the tonality a lot easier, more of a sort of colouring device, you know, instead of, yeah, I'm not really into fine control that much. I don't want to get bogged down with tweaking. Yeah, so I've taken the tone down, it's like down into the darker realm, as it says, and I've taken the bottom end off and I've given it some drive. Okay, so that's the second part, and then the same Sten kit I've used, and you'll see that stays in for the rest of the track. And this is the big hi-hat sound, which is like based on a 909. Main thing here is the rhythm, which is like obviously very important, and that's the rhythm. I'm looking at it, and it's got a little bit of swing on it. So you see here just before the end there's a little bit of swing on that second last. So I might get quite tweaky with things like swinging hi-hats particularly. Get in there and like nudge things around just a little bit. That's pretty straight, but this second blue guy is off the beat, and those little things make a difference. Yeah, so that's the three parts there. If I unsolo that, just listen to the Sten drums. There you go. Now the other parts I've got on it, I've got a Panman. Panman is a Soundtoys plugin. I use Soundtoys on everything. And what you'll notice is I've made sure that the snare is always pretty much in the middle. So this little red guy is the panning, but you'll see that the clop when I say the snare, this part down here, the SN, it's kind of largely, it's sitting in the middle. And then the hi-hats are doing the... So you might decide to separate those parts out into individual channels and then treat them separately, but for my purposes, that was enough. The snare is largely in the middle, in the same place, and the hi-hats are kind of moving around. So for me, that's job done. Then I've got a Valhalla delay. Quite often I'll just use a reverb, Valhalla room rather, reverb. And quite often I'll use a reverb on the channel. Sometimes I'll usually have a drum bus as well set up, but quite often I'll just use an individual sound that I like the sound of on a channel. It's not, you're listening to dance music, no one cares if it sounds like it was in the same room. It's so artificial anyway that you just pick a flavour. And it's funny because when you're watching guide videos by people, quite often they're people who are mixing rock or indie or whatever, or straight kind of pop music. And a lot of the time then it's more important to create a cohesion between the parts operating in the same room, etc. And that can be nice in electronic music too, that can be. But you can also totally break that rule completely. There's no reason for them to sound like they're in the same room. If it sounds right in the bigger picture, then it's right. After the reverb, I've got the delay. So for whatever reason, I preferred the sound of the delay coming after the reverb. So usually you might have the reverb afterwards, you might expect that, but in this case it sounded better with the delay after. So now that makes it quite wet because the reverb's been delayed as well, but in this circumstance I like the way that sounded, so it's quite wet. The drums are quite a wet sound. That's the Sten kit. Next up we've got a Found Sound kit. Found sound being any sound which is from a non-standard source, namely it could be a machine or a sound you scraping something or whatever. And some of these kits I made in 2005 or something when I first began, and I made a bunch of kits and they've stuck me in good stead ever since. Just recordings of machines, recordings of... I remember I got some sound library stuff off a studio I used to do some work for. They were like a sync studio for TV. And they had big sound libraries, and at the time that was like gold dust for me, so I pinched them, and some of those I just chopped up into random chunks, just whatever came out was right. Yeah, and I still use them. Found Sound 1, this is like one of those very early kits, and it's still doing the job for me now. Okay, so in this case, so that's quite a distinctive sound, and it's quite an important sound in this track. Like, it is very important. It really makes the rhythm come together. And again, there's no complexity here. It's a single sound on a single line, a little bit of velocity. The intro sound is like a little bit, you know, it's offbeat and it's quiet. relatively, but that's it. That little bit of velocity makes a big difference, so it's important that that first beat is quieter than the other two. You know, you can hear that. Doom, doom, doom. So that's right. Okay, and then in terms of treatment, yet again, smooshing it with Decapitator. I think that when I made Dust, I'd probably only just bought the Soundtoys plugins. And when you first get something, you're like, oh man, I'm going to get that on everything. So it's on everything. In this case, I've chosen the A setting. I don't know what that denotes. I know Neve, N is Neve, T is transistor, but beyond that, I know nothing. Again, I've got the low cut on it to take off the bass. If I... it's got an absolutely massive bottom end on it. So again, I've totally cut the bottom completely. Don't need it. I just want the clack. And again, Valhalla room, tried and tested. And again, a completely different room. It's a large room instead of a large chamber. Chambers generally sound great on drums. Rooms I use less so, but in this case, obviously felt like it was good. And it's quite long. It's like 1.6 seconds, not huge, but for a drum. And 27%, it's quite wet. So that's that. That's that sound. Now, something else about the way I put things together. I'm going to move this synth part out of here. I'm just talking about drums for now. But yeah, the way I work is obviously I've got the kick running. It's all about how the parts work off each other. It's not like I would have sat down and written that found sound part on its own, you know, without having everything else running. Obviously everything else was running already. Usually I'd write the parts for one kit all at one time. So these three parts, I probably wrote them all at the same time in the same sitting, and then I might have written them all in one little window here. Like you can see that I've done some, see all these muted bits. I probably experimented. I probably just knocked up a pattern in that one window and then subsequently divided it into parts so that then I could lay them out when I was doing the arrangement. That's probably what I did. Anyway, and then I've got the fan sound. Okay, so we're getting there into a kind of groove now. And subknock, next part. So that's kind of like the bass line for this track, is actually just a knocking, like a deep. Again, you know, it's not exactly rocket science, is it? What's interesting is if you have something on the very first beat of the bar, it gives it a sort of a decisiveness, like a I mean business kind of sense, you know? And it's funny that those kind of things make such a difference. If I nudge this bass part back by like a 16th or something, you'll hear the difference. It won't sound quite so sure of itself. So if I go to delay, this is something I use all the time, by the way, delay and velocity, transpose, just messing with your MIDI parts while they play. Anyway, if I delay this by, I'll play it first as it is normally. And I'm going to include my I'm going to mute the hi-hat part just because it makes it clearer, and then I'm going to try delaying, like making it go at a different beat. I'm going to delay it by a 16th, and we'll see how that sounds. I'll delay it by a 16th plus 16. Oh, where are we? There we go. Quite different. By now by another 16th. They'll sound quite decent. You could use all of them. That's it. You can see it's just more like it's very straight, but it kind of works against the other percussions. Okay, so that sound there comes from, I think, Concrete 3. Yeah, Sonic Couture. These guys make these really great sound libraries. Some of the best. These Concrete kits are really old now, but they're still some of the greatest sounds. They went to a huge amount of trouble to record great sounds, and they're so usable. If anything, they're kind of overproduced because they're so perfectly put together. You know, it's hard to make them do more. But I do find that I used to pitch them down a lot, like maybe 2 octaves down, like -24 semitones, just to make them, give them a different kind of mood, and so that it didn't quite sound quite so, yeah, quite so much the same. So this guy is, yeah, that's that one. Maybe just check if I did do any bass. No, I didn't do anything with it particularly. I didn't pitch it down. It's got some reverb on it. That's about it. Okay. And on that one, I've got, again, a little pan guy sending him around. Same setting as the other one, because obviously we want to tie them together. This wasn't here. I didn't have Pro Q then. I'm just doing what I probably would have done on the other EQ, which is just take the bass off, and very little mixing production on it. And again, Decapitator. Again, actually, this is interesting because there's no settings on it. Oh, actually, that's because I've used it later on. I've automated it. So coming up towards the end of the track, I've begun to drive it more for whatever reason, build into a sort of an ending. Okay, next up, Piano Knock. This is another Sona Couture one, and this sound comes from, yeah, again, a separate kit. This is an extended piano kit, so someone hitting a piano literally in different ways. And this one, you can see I have pitched it down by -10, so it's quite a bit deeper than it was in the originally recording. I've panned it a bit. Okay, I better solo that because it's getting hard to hear all the different parts. That's that. That's the sound. Super simple, as you'll be used to by now. So yeah, it's just about all these simple parts line up with each other. So it's syncopated, but they're all simple in their own right. But when you put them together, it sounds much more complicated and syncopated. So that's the drums. And that is it. There's nothing else complex going on. I don't think there's any automation even. It's just actually quite weird to me now. Okay, I've got some filtering, really basic filtering going on in that deep kind of bassy noise, note, and kick. Nah, no automation whatsoever. It's possible there was some automation on the EQ plugins which haven't loaded, but even then I don't think so, because that would normally show up as a unused lane. So it couldn't be any more simple. So that's the drums. What I would do these days is I would collect all my drums into a channel, just so that I had it as a collapsible channel. In those days, Logic didn't have that capacity, so I might call that drums. It just makes it easier to get your way around the session. Okay, so that's that. Drums, done. That's the drums. And then, okay, this is an interesting one. While I was messing around, it's not like I thought, oh, what does this song need? It needs this. This is more one of those situations where I'm messing around with a kit. In this case, my Ryoji glitch kit, which is me doing like tiny samples of Ryoji Akida. All his tracks, which are these tiny little glitchy sounds. And yeah, they're very easy to just take little sections of, just basically error noises. And I wrote a pattern for it, obviously using one of the many other sounds. But I decided, in my wisdom, oh no, I didn't. Okay, so I started writing it in the Ryoji glitch kit, and I had like a little percussion pattern going on, right? So I've written it out as a percussion pattern. But subsequently, accidentally, it couldn't find the kit maybe when it loaded, and if that happens, it plays the default sine wave in the sampler. And if I load this up, if I open this, it hasn't got anything loaded. There's nothing there. It's not loading anything. All it has is the sine wave, and all I've done is just tune it so that it sits at the pitch I want. Okay, and that's it. So it's just the sine wave in the default patch of EXS24, but it really serves an important role in this track because it provides this what you would call like either an ostinato or a single note, which kind of makes sense of all the other harmonies. If you have one note that everything else works around, then you know it's got a meaning. So yeah, so that's that. Again, I've got a pan man, This time it's doing some actual just like jumping around. But the important thing in this case is this happens before it goes to a delay. And that means that actually when you add the delay, it creates more of a kind of gentle swirling effect instead of it just being a jumpy thing. So that's why I can get away with such a jumpy movement. I wouldn't choose it otherwise, because without the delay it would sound, well, I'll show you what it sounds like. A bit like discombobulating and a bit annoying, jumping around the stereo field. But this is one of my favorite plugins, GRM delays. So GRM delays, let's make the screen, we can make it big, yay. So GRM delays, these are my guys. I've been using these since year dot. And this is a secret weapon for definite. Like, what you can do with this is you can create these beautiful kind of phasey long delay effects with as many delays as you want. I've got 22 here, but yeah, you can use anything up to 72 or something like that, 100. And it creates this kind of blurring effect, but with a slight stuttery sound. It's not clean, but it is amazing. And you've also got this thing called a super slider at the bottom here, which you can move around and create like big sweeping weird movements and tones and all sorts of things. I'm not going to mess with settings now, but that's a great plugin. So that's it for like the percussions. Like that is it. Okay, so there we go. That's our percussions. And you can see the arrangement is as simple as you want. It's very, very basic. There's not even any transitions or anything. I'm not quite sure how I got away with that, honestly. But there you go. That's the way it goes sometimes. You just don't need them. And if you don't need them, you don't need them. Okay, so next step. Let's talk about the vocal, because the vocal's like obviously the biggest part of the track, the main part of the track. If I start here, so I'm obviously going to have to explain that a bit because it sounds like there's a lot going on, and there is. So that's where a lot, like everything in the drums is super simple, but there's actually a lot of work gone into the vocals here. So the way it works in Kima, I can't tell you everything because it's too complex, but basically it's cross synthesis, which is where you take one thing and cross it with another, and it's kind of like a complex vocoder. And the difference being that Kima operates at much higher quality than any native kind of effect using the same technology. They're getting closer, there's no question. Like, there's more plugins now because of the DSP power in computers, that those effects are getting closer to Kima, but they're still not as sharp as Kima. Kima sounds, it's almost like fluid. It's got like a liquid quality sometimes, and it's also a DSP environment, so you can make it do anything. And I use it for all my live shows, all the performance stuff, all the things which need multi-surround sound, where you want a different thing on each channel, all that stuff. That's all Kima. But in this case, what I've done is I've got a vocal loop, and I'll play you the vocal loop that I probably used, actually. I think it's probably the original thing I recorded. So it's this guy up here, probably. Let's have a listen. Let's have a listen to me singing. No, that's the very first one I recorded, because you can hear the noise from using like my microphone in my laptop or something. That's literally what that would have been recorded on. Let's have a listen to this one, see if it's any better. Probably not, frankly. There we go. So I will have taken that loop, loaded it into Kima, and loaded a drum loop on the other side of the cross synthesis, and basically crossed a vocal with a drum loop, and that's created that kind of, you can hear it's half drums and half vocal. It's not the same drum loop as these. It would have been a drum loop that happened in the development process of the track. So this track has been through like maybe, I don't know, 3 main iterations, and during one of those I created loops with it sounds like the Sten kit still, but it sounds like a different one. And then I've taken just a loop and loaded it into Kima and done that. here we've got another one, loop, formant, adjust. Okay, so in that case, yeah, in that case, it's just a different effect, different stuff. We've got another one. Okay, I'm going a bit more mental there, and yeah, basically, I've just recorded a whole bunch of different things in Kima, and then they're all using the same vocal loop, but all against different drums and different cross synthesis techniques and stuff. And then I've loaded them in later, color coded them so I can see what's going on, and then laid them out. Treatment wise, this has got quite heavy handed treatment to make it kind of stick out. It's a kind of main feature of the track. So I'm using this thing, which is a great thing. I use this a lot on the Reykjavik album to make the vocals sit like quite sharp and upfront. And for that, I haven't come across anything which does a better job. It's like Maserati Vox on Waves. It's usually like $20 or something. And yeah, it's designed for pop production really. So it's got this very upfront sound, and you can really like make the vocal pop right up to the front. And it works for this really well. So if I turn it off, it's really pushing it up front. Again, EQ is just a replacement for the EQ that's missing, but it's probably just a roll off. I will have probably done some more EQing on that. It's quite a sharp sound. But I don't know what the EQing I did and it was, but you know, probably some timing at the like 5K, 6K region where it's like really kind of sharp and technical, digital. And then I've got another room reverb on, different room, but it's still the room algorithm in Valhalla Room, so it'll sound quite similar to the other room I used. Slightly different settings, longer for the vocal, and yeah, and that's the vocal. And the vocal changes throughout the track, and there's definitely more thought gone into the arrangement with that because it makes a difference what's playing against what. And then there's also the untainted vocal, the vocal which is like more like the actual vocal, the sing along. So if I play that dry, this is just recorded with my SM58, very simply sitting in front of the computer, and then yeah, that's it. That's how it sounds when it's raw. And this is like the redone vocal. This isn't like my original vocal. This is like when I knew what the vocal was going to be and what the words are going to be. And then yeah, next step is I've got this guy, which I used a lot actually, particularly Reykjavik, and in this. I'm going to make the track bigger because you actually can see what's going on there. So yeah, let's make that bigger. What this plugin does, and this is one that comes with Logic, it's called Vocal Transformer, and it doesn't sound clean. It doesn't sound like it's not like Melodyne where you can get away with tweaking things. It's more like Robot. But a trick I've used a lot is to put it into 50-50 mode, wet dry, and then play it. So literally like adjust the pitch so you're writing in a harmony. You can do this with lots of other plugins. It's just this one comes with Logic, and I kind of like the way it sounds. So now you've got harmony. So here. So that's the harmony. So you can see I've just written it in. But that's what makes a track. It gives it a harmony, and it makes it kind of got a bit more of a kind of like an emotive edge once you add that. It's got a basic pitch correction on it, just, you know, iron out any kinks in my dodgy vocals. We've got Crystallizer, which is another Soundtoys guy, and this adds like a little like reverse delay on it. Then I've put a bit crusher on. The first thing you'll notice there when I put the bit crusher on is how much noise there is in the background. One, because I don't record my vocals with any care whatsoever, so it's tons of noise floor. For me, this has always been something I liked. I like the noise flat. I like the dirt and dust. I like the mess. Not always. Sometimes, all right, I'll get rid of it because it's not working. But generally speaking, I like that. And there's other things I use, like certain compressors and things which will bring that out. And you just use it as a part of the sound, the shaping. And then finally, I've got another little delay on the end of it. But this looks like it's on at 0%. So it looks like I'm just using this as a, yeah, I'm mixing it in for the transitions. So I'm coming up for a transition, I'm mixing it in, and I'm probably turning up the feedback. Yeah, there we go. So if I play that to you, you can hear what the second delay is doing. It's making me go duh for a long time. That's always a nice thing to do. You control the feedback to make it last and all that. And it bonds the two parts of the track together. It's a transition. Transitions are really important, and obviously in EDM and all that, like they go mental for transitions, and it becomes like ridiculous, kind of, you know, it becomes its own thing almost. I say ridiculous, it's everyone's taste, but it does become like as much transition as there is track. So it's like you're trying to settle into something. It's just like transitioning left, right, and center. Anyway, it's an important part of writing music is transitions. Okay, that's that, and then the vocal comes in again. We'll talk a little bit about arrangement once I've gone through the parts. Final parts. There's only two more parts, and that's keys. There's these key parts which were written for the CS80, and this is the original part, and it has like a basic filter, a basic delay. Oh no, it doesn't. I'm lying. It doesn't have a basic delay. It has a. This is a setting I use on Echo Boy all the time. I'm going to make this available as amongst other things on my page at some point. Maybe a Patreon thing. It may be like I may put up a bunch of presets as like for subscribers or something. But basically, yeah, these are the settings for Echo Boy which I've used over and over. This one's called Analogify, and basically I'm using the tape delay 100% mix, but with no time on it. This is something I use in lots of different ways in lots of iterations, but basically I'm driving it a little bit and then I'm making it wobble, so it's making it yeah, kind of detune, basically slowly detune, but it's not putting any delay on it. It's more like a very slow chorus. So yeah, so that's that. But that version of CS80 doesn't load anymore because they did that annoying thing where they changed the name, so you can't load the old sessions. Anyway, so it's now got CS80 V3, which I've tried to recreate the sound, not entirely successfully. Hence the name of the preset, Sin Dust Nearly. So yeah, I had to just start from scratch and try and create something similar, and never quite got it the same, but maybe I could have spent longer. And the only things I've got here are release times for the two oscillators and frequency, which is I'm just following the filter curve that I used originally. Okay, so this sounds like it's got no release at the beginning here. Okay, so that's the parts there. You see, it's just two chords. I'm just going along. Sometimes you'll see these like ghost notes where I've played around with other ideas on top and then discarded them. But I always keep those parts. I just mute them. Just press M, mute them, and then you never know when they'll come in handy again. So that's the opening part. But then it changes color, which means it becomes a new part. Then they become longer. So this is a good trick. You've got a part written. Don't need to change the notes really, or change them very little, but then just make them longer. Changes the feel completely. Okay, so that's that part. I can see I've turned off the EQ and Novox. Okay, so I didn't talk about the last two parts of that vocal, which I'd muted. One, Diamond EQ. This is a really beautiful sounding EQ, very high-end sounding, and really great for a vocal. You can see I've given it a lot of boost up top because I've recorded it in sort of a muffly way. So I'm basically correcting my recording errors. There's lots of EQ going on there. It's quite heavy-handed, but kind of has to be. And then I've put it through the Arvox, which is the Waves Arvox compressor. Smooth compressor. Arvox, as it suggests, is specifically designed for vocals, and it's super easy and it just works. Okay, again, this part, it then changes again. So it's based on the same idea. That's the part before. It's got more of a kind of like melody line quality to it. It's like shifting, but then it goes back into like straight chords like that. Super simple. Just 2 chords, and that goes on for the rest of the track pretty much. And then I go back to the other parts later on. So it's like an arrangement thing. And another thing which I often do is take those same chord parts which I've written once, and I'll just use them on a second instrument and see what it sounds like. In this case, I used what's called a Nova chord, which is like a very old form of organ, electronic organ. It's like the first synthesizer almost. So it's the same part, it's just on a totally different instrument. It sounds like I bit crushed it as well. Again, that's not an instrument that loaded properly, I don't think, with the session, so I haven't got the part. But it's it would have been the Sonic Couture Nova chord. They make a Nova chord that's really beautiful sounding. Great instrument as well. Okay, so that's just that. It gives you somewhere else to go. Like if we're talking about, let's talk about arrangement now. So it's a dance floor track. I've treated it like a dance floor track. I've kept it with the drums being the main thing all the way through. The kick doesn't even have a drop. It just goes. And yeah, so that's the bottom line. So all of the action really happens between the synth and the vocal. That's it. There's not even a synthesizer line. There's not even like a bass line as such. There's just a rhythmic kind of ongoing thing. So it couldn't be any simpler. That's probably why it came together quickly. And yeah, so we've got a simple chord part comes in to begin with. That chord part is short, so it keeps it kind of snappy. It's just like an introduction. Then it kind of lengthens out a bit and turns into a bit more melodic, and it kind of leads into the break. And this is the important bit. It swaps over with the vocal. So all of the time it's about the relationship between the pad sound and the vocal. It's like, here comes the pad drops, and then the vocal comes in. And that's the first transition. And then what happens again at the end of the vocal part is it crosses over to the other vocal part, which is more synthesized, and the pads come in again as well, but they come in lower in the mix. So what I've done is they're filtered right out, basically, if I remember rightly. Yeah, they're filtered right down. So again, if I play from the vocal part, okay, I'm keeping the pad really low here. I'm just going to keep it playing and talk over the top. And it's just building tension. It's just like, just pacing, keeping time. And it's unusual actually, because it's not, normally I do things by 8 bars like everyone else. And keeping it going for an extra 8 bars, it's just like a little bit, and there's another little whoop on the vocal up there. And then it'll open up, and then I'll bring in the hat at the same time. So I'm opening the filter and dropping the hat. Pretty classic. And changing the vocal. That goes for another 8 bars, and then I bring in the main vocal on top of that. So this is almost like peak time. Okay, and then it will come out into, it's almost like a reprise, and then you've got the second synth part. Okay. And then it kind of has a little kind of breakdown, but it still keep the hat in and all the rest of it. The vocal has another little moment in the sun, and then a final drop, and then it's like comes out into just like pads and outro almost. I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, that's it. There's a new vocal part at the end here. Tau manipulate. Tau is like one of the processes in Kima. So let's have a quick listen to that, because that is going to be different. Okay, it's just another pretty mental messing with the vocal thing. And that is it, kids. That is it. That is all there is to it. Yeah, there's nothing else there. I didn't even have any processing on the pre-master, on the bus, on the master bus. These days I would nearly always have something quite often like working into like a compressor, operating at a kind of low level. But yeah, that's it. Very little on the way processing. And then I gave it a rub for the master. It was RNS, so I suspect they probably got it mastered properly. If it was just me, then it would just go out. I'd give it a master, but I'd, you know, home master, let's call it. Home master, which is not the same as a mastering engineer. Yeah, that's it. That's dust. So my plan is to do more of these and a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to start doing more tutorial videos on all sorts of things, covering some of the stuff I covered there, but obviously in a lot more detail. And yeah, and I think when I get the Patreon up and running, people will be able to request track breakdowns, so we can talk about individual tracks, ask questions. I've seen other people do like sessions where they have live Q&A and all that kind of stuff. That's also possible. It's not impossible. I haven't really investigated everything, and yeah, the website should be live by the time this goes online. I'll probably put it up with the new website, but there's going to be a lot more, yeah, tuition and tutorials and that kind of stuff. But yeah, anyway, I'll write about more of that later. So for now, farewell.